Greetings. Ken Woodward here. Welcome back to another episode of Curated Questions. Together, we engage inquisitive humans about how they use questions to navigate and make sense of our world. I'm a fellow traveler and pilgrim on this journey, and I'm glad you're here. It's late. The workday is officially over, but my laptop is still open, and I'm doing that thing I said I wouldn't do. One more quick check. I open an AI tab to help with this episode, and on a whim, I scroll back through my chat history. Months of conversations, episode ideas, email drafts, questions I've thrown into a box when I was tired or up against a deadline. Reading it feels a little like flipping through a diary written in my voice by someone else. The answers are sharp, structured, and confident. Some of them I've forgotten I didn't write myself. And as I scroll, I notice two things happening at once. Part of me relaxes. All of this help is right here. I don't have to face the blank page alone. And part of me tightens, because there's a sameness to the sentences. A gentle fog starts to settle over my own thinking. The questions that brought me to the page in the first place suddenly feel less urgent, less alive. Not gone exactly, just flattened. In this episode, I wanted to sit with something I haven't been able to shake. What happens to our capacity for wonder when almost any question we have can be answered instantly and pleasantly and by a machine? A few episodes back, we spent some time with wonder in the age of infinite images. The scroll, the submarine, the market, the Romanesco. We asked what our screens were doing to our sense of awe. Here, I want to approach the same territory from a different angle and ask a quieter question. What are instant, endlessly confident answers doing to the way we hold our questions? To get any traction on this, I've had to start with a distinction that's been following me around. I've been calling them tool questions and threshold questions. Tool questions are the ones you'd happily hand to an assistant. How do I fix this script for validating email syntax? What's a decent microphone under $200? Give me 3 icebreakers for a Tuesday morning staff meeting. These are questions about tactics, logistics, and the clearing of mundane underbrush. They are fantastic questions for AI. They save time, they reduce friction, and I use AI for exactly this without apology. Threshold questions are different. They live at the doorway of a new season. Someone in my network, Claire Brown, who hosts the Art Engager podcast for 5 years, just published her final episode. And I found myself wondering what questions she had been sitting with in the months leading up to that decision. Whether it was, who am I becoming as I build this thing? Or is it time to stay or time to go? Those are threshold questions. These questions don't just ask for new information. They ask for a new self. They require time, risk, and sometimes grief. Here's the thing. AI can respond to both kinds. It can give you a brilliant to-do list for your tool questions, and it can give you eloquent, wise-sounding paragraphs for your threshold questions. That's not the problem. The problem is that the machine is so good at sounding wise that it can trick us into thinking a threshold has been crossed, when really, all that's happened is that we've received a very articulate average of what's already out there. In the Wonder episode, I talked about how wonder lives in the space between I don't know and I'm willing to find out, and how scroll culture tries to collapse that space with increasingly spectacular images. Now I'm sitting with what happens when we collapse that space with increasingly spectacular sentences. If you've been listening for a while, you know I am sensitive about numbness, the slow, quiet kind that shows up when life gets too loud and our systems just tap out. In that Wonder episode, I'll tell stories about gray days, fractals, and nature journaling as ways back to feeling. What I'm noticing now is that AI offers us a different path to the same cliff. On the surface, it looks like a cure for overwhelm. Too many emails? Let me write them. Too many articles? Let me summarize them. Too many options? Let me recommend the top three. And some days, that's a genuine mercy. But there are other days when I realize I'm not just delegating tasks, I'm starting to outsource contact with the sharp edges of my own life. Not long ago, my wife and I needed to have a conversation about financial alignment. My first impulse was to open an AI tab and type something like, how do I talk to my partner about finances? What came back was impressive. Step by step guidance, suggested phrases, empathy statements, boundary language, the full architecture of a difficult conversation, pre assembled and ready for use. It was like being handed a summit photo from Everest, a perfectly composed picture from the outcome without any of the altitude sickness, without the missteps, the gasps for air, the moment when you realize you've been going the wrong direction for 2 hours. And I noticed if I follow this script word for word, I will probably say the right things, but I might also miss the one thing this conversation actually needs, which is me, my hesitations, my awkwardness, my willingness to say it imperfectly, but truthfully. I would miss out on the physical sensations of living on that edge. This is where our humanity lives. This is where we get our reps and sets in, so when the machine is unavailable, the internal circuitry is hardwired to handle the situation. During my 1,300 conversations as I walked Washington, D.C., I needed this learned capacity to engage with those I met along the way. Numbness doesn't always look like doom scrolling until 2 in the morning. Sometimes it looks like using very smart tools to stand just far enough away from our own fear and grief and confusion that we don't have to feel them fully. Wonder pulls us in the opposite direction. Author Cole Arthur Riley puts it this way: wonder doesn't dismiss pain, it brings us out of numbness. Wonder asks us to come closer to the thing we don't fully understand, to linger, to let it change our breathing. AI makes it very easy to step back, to put one more layer of well-worded language between us and the thing itself. So what do we do with that tension? The invitation, as I understand it, is not to go off the grid and pretend these tools don't exist. I use them. I'm using them in some form even as I shape this episode. The invitation is to use them in a way that protects the capacity for wonder, rather than quietly eroding it. Here are 3 practices that have been helping me do that. The first is question triage. Before I type a question into an AI, I pause and ask myself, is this a tool question or a threshold question? Tool question? Into the box. Help me brainstorm 10 episode titles. Summarize this PDF into 3 bullets. Turn these rough notes into a cleaner outline. Threshold question? I try to route it somewhere else, into a journal, onto a walk, into a conversation with someone who knows my story, into prayer or silence. Should I take this? What am I afraid of here? What kind of neighbor do I want to be in this season? I don't do it perfectly. I break my own rule regularly, but building that tiny moment of discernment in front of the text box has already kept some of my most important questions out of the wrong room. The second practice is the second question rule. Anytime I use AI for something substantial, I commit to asking one more question afterward, the one the machine cannot answer, and I take that question with me when I close the tab. AI helps me outline a solo episode. My second question is, what part of this feels risky enough that I'm tempted to cut it out? AI helps me prep for an interview. My second question is, what do I generally hope this guest feels by the end of our conversation? AI helps me draft an email about a new project. My second question is, who will I become if I say yes to this? Those second questions don't go back into the chat box. They go into a notebook or a voice memo or onto the walk. They're a way of making sure AI is the beginning of my reflection, not the end of it. The third practice is in the wonder block. 30 minutes on the calendar, once a week, where I am not allowed to outsource anything. No AI, no search engine, no asking strangers on the internet, just one live question, a blank page, maybe a neighborhood loop at one end of a dog leash. Sometimes the question is large. What am I pretending not to know about this situation? Sometimes it's small and specific. What did I actually notice this week when I walked through the city? The goal in that half hour is not to arrive at an answer. The goal is to feel the discomfort of not knowing again and to stay with it long enough that wonder has a chance to show up. Around those practices, I've been experimenting with a few personal guardrails. They'll probably change, but right now they look a little something like this. No AI on the first draft of anything that feels like core creative work. Essays, solo episodes, the newsletter. It can be a helpful editor. It doesn't get to speak first. No AI when I'm crafting questions for a guest. It can help with background or context, but the questions themselves have to come from me paying attention to that particular person. And finally, a small AI free window each day, usually first thing in the morning, so that first voice shaping my interior world isn't a machine. I hold these loosely. This isn't a legal code, but naming them has made it much easier to notice when I'm reaching for AI to avoid feeling something rather than serving the work. A while back on this show, we talked about questions asked in the wrong room, how some questions are too tender, too costly to be thrown into just any environment and expected to grow. The more I live with these tools, the more I think the AI chat box is the wrong room for certain questions. Not because AI is dangerous, not because it's trying to flatten us, but because some questions need eye contact. Some questions need silence. Some questions need the telltale crack in our own voice that tells us you finally said something true. I keep thinking about the people watching us use these tools. Kids, students, younger colleagues. If their first instinct when they don't know something is to ask a device instead of a parent or a teacher or a neighbor, what kind of question asking muscles will they build? And which ones will quietly atrophy, the way of the muscle when no longer taxed with weight? In the Wonder episode, I ended with this. The only cost of liberation is the decision to pay attention. In an AI age, I think that means paying attention not only to what we're asking, but where we're asking it, and what we might be giving up, one fast and polished answer at a time. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What is one threshold question in your life right now that you're tempted to outsource? And what would it look like to keep that one between you, your own soul, and the people who really know you?